You know that feeling when you put on a certain outfit and it just changes your whole vibe, maybe how you carry yourself, or even your mood? Well, it turns out that feeling is very, very real. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty amazing study that looks at the deep connection between the clothes we wear and what's actually going on in our brains. So let's start with a question. Think about it for a sec. If you had to pick one, which makes you more aware of your own body? A really tight pair of jeans? Or maybe a top that shows a little more skin? It's a feeling most of us can probably relate to, but scientists actually designed an experiment to get a real answer. But to really get what they found, we have to understand one key psychological idea first. And that core idea is something called self-objectification. I know, it sounds a little clinical, right? But it actually describes a super common experience, especially for women in a lot of cultures. So what is it exactly? Well, self-objectification is basically when we start to see our own bodies through someone else's eyes. It's like you stop being the main character of your own life, and instead, you become an object in the background, mostly just judged on how you look. This whole concept comes from something called Objectification Theory, which was laid out in this really important paper back in 1997. The researchers argued that when you live in a culture that is just constantly focused on appearance, people, and again, especially women, start to internalize that outside perspective. It becomes their own. And this slide just nails the difference. You've got two mindsets, right? On one side, there's the observer's view, which is always asking, how do I look? But on the other side, you've got the internal view, which is focused on how do I feel? The theory says that the more time we spend stuck in that first column, the more we're seeing ourselves as an object. Okay, so now that we've got that idea down, let's see how researchers actually put this to the test. They came up with a really clever experiment to figure out what it is exactly about our clothes that flips that switch in our brain. You know, the one that makes us go from how do I feel to how do I look? So to make sure they were just testing the clothes themselves, the researchers got really specific with their participants. They chose 120 female university students in China, all between 18 and 25, and all within a normal BMI range. By keeping the group consistent, they could filter out other variables and really just focus on the outfits. Now here is where it gets really smart. The participants were randomly put into one of 4 groups, each with a different outfit. This let the researchers separate 2 key things: how revealing the clothes were and how tight-fitting they were. You can see the 4 combos they tested, from revealing and tight all the way to full and loose. But wait, there's more. They also tested these outfits in 2 totally different settings. First up, a private setting, just the person, alone in a dressing room with a mirror. Then, a public setting, where they walked into a lounge with 2 strangers who, plot twist, were actually part of the research team. This was to see if just being seen would crank up the effect. So, with all these different outfits in settings, what were they actually measuring? They were looking for something called state self-objectification. That's basically just a fancy term for a snapshot of how much a person was viewing themselves as an object in that very specific moment, right after they put the clothes on. Okay, so the stage is set, the measurements are taken, so what was the verdict? Did revealing this matter more, or was it the tightness? Let's get to the results. The first big finding was a slam dunk. It didn't matter if the clothes were tight or loose. Wearing the more revealing outfits, like the ones that showed the midriff, caused a major spike in self-objectification compared to the full coverage outfits. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. They found the exact same thing for tightness. It was totally independent. The tight-fitting clothes, even the ones that covered everything up, also led to way higher levels of self-objectification than the loose, baggy clothes. This table lays it all out perfectly. Just look at the scores. Whether they were in private or in public, the absolute highest level of self-objectification came from the revealing and tight clothing, and the lowest, the full and loose outfit. The big takeaway here is that both of these things, revealingness and tightness, were adding to the effect. And what about the setting? Oh yeah, it made a huge difference. You can see it right here in this chart. Just the simple act of being around 2 strangers kicked everyone's average self-objectification score up a few notches, no matter what they were wearing. So, to finally answer our first question, it's not an either-or situation. It's a both-and. Both the amount of skin you show and how tight your clothes are can, on their own, make you see your body more as an object to be looked at. And that feeling gets even stronger when other people are around.
Now, this is all really cool from a science perspective, but what does it actually mean for us in our day-to-day lives? Why should we even care about this little mental switch that our clothes can flip?
Well, as the original theorists pointed out, our clothing choices can actually be a conscious strategy. Think about it. If constantly checking how you look is mentally draining, then maybe choosing looser, more comfortable clothing is a way to give your brain a break, to, as they put it so perfectly, opt out of the objectification limelight. The study really points to some practical takeaways. For one, we can use our wardrobe as a tool to manage our own focus. For another, maybe designers should think more about the psychological comfort of their clothes, not just the physical feel. And this last one is huge for the workplace. It suggests that uniforms or dress codes that are super tight could actually backfire, pulling our mental energy away from our jobs and toward monitoring how we look. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. If we know that our clothes have the power to shift our minds from how do I feel to how do I look, what does that mean for the choices we make every morning, especially for places like work or school, where our brain power is what really counts?